Hi BookTube, so I'm actually holding myself accountable and doing as I say I'm going to do, and going to be reviewing the books I've read in the first week of February, 1st through the 7th. I know it's kind of a funny day on a Thursday to be doing a weekly wrap-up, but if I don't do it now, as the days goes on, I'm going to be reading more and more books, and I'm just going to have too many to talk about or think about. So I've read a total of 12 books in the first 7 days. And a lot of that's due to being romance and children's books predominantly, and I can just fly through those. So yeah, let's get into what I read. And so some of these are for the retro romance readathon. Most of them are, but a couple of the romance books I just saw and it caught my eye. So the first one here is an Harlequin Intrigue, and this is by B.J. Daniels, and this is part of the White Horse Montana series, and this is Secret of Dead Man's Coulee. And this is the first B.J. Daniels book I've read, and I really like it. This is probably the favorite, especially Intrigue, but I mean overall of like the Harlequin books, this is probably like my favorite one that I have read. I really liked her writing style, and like the mystery. It actually felt more like a thriller to me, and maybe that's why I like it, because I do like other things more than just like a predominantly romance storyline. But this is following a woman, and I can't remember any of these people's names, by the way, like it's all like flown out of my head. But there's a woman who is coming back to her really, really itty bitty small town in Montana, and she stumbles upon an airplane that's been crashed into like a ravine or a coulee, and so she goes to see what this is about, and it comes to find out when she gets closer to it, it's an old plane, and then she gets stuck there during like a kind of like a blizzard situation, and so then the person that comes to rescue her is her like long ex-boyfriend from high school, who is now the sheriff, and so those two are going to come together, whether they like it or not, to to solve this mystery. And so when I was also whenever I read about a new author, read a book from a new author, I like seeing reading about their biography as well. And so B.J. Daniels lives in really small town Montana, so I feel like she knows what she's talking about, and for sure I'm going to pick up more from her. And I've already got the second book in this series out from the library. And then I'm just going to do my ebooks first, and then I'll do the physical books. So then I have, this is another one that's romance book, but not for the retro romance readathon. This is by Kit McBride. Oh no, it's by Amy Berry, and it's called Kit McBride Gets a Wife. And this was, I think this came out in 2022. It was a really cute story because it's the mail order bride, like historical, story that I've read a bazillion times, I feel like. But in this one, it was super cute because it's not the guy, it's not the man who's answering or like putting out, in the newspapers for a bride. It's this little girl called Junebug, which I love the name. She was my favorite character of all of the people in this story, and she has four older brothers, and she decides to put an ad, and then this woman comes along, and there's a romance takes place. But Junebug, I really like her character, and this is part of a series as well, and so I'm gonna continue on when they were published, because I don't think this second one's been published yet, just to see if Junebug makes an appearance, and like maybe she's gonna get a wife for each of the brothers somehow. Then I have it says Greatest Texas Love Stories of All Time. This is by Silhouette, and it's The Texas Touch by Kate Thomas, and this is Cuddly Ken. There's a lot of information here, but the title of the book is The Texas Touch, and this one I didn't really care for it that much. It's about a woman who's living again in a small town in Texas, and the male lead, he is an ex NFL football player, and he got hurt, and so now he's trying to make a turn over a new leaf in a way and leave the LA lifestyle, and so he becomes a football coach for this itty bitty small town. And the story that sounds fine. It's just the writing was just a bit like cringy for me, and it's like he had plans from the get-go. Not only did he want to like change his career and go from like the big stage of NFL player to like just a small Texas high school football coach. He has designs from the get-go to he wants to get a wife, he wants to have children, wants to have a family. And the very first woman he sees at I think it's like a picnic or some kind of like buffet style thing. Oh, she's the one for me. And it's just like it was like the too fast of like what's it called? I don't read enough romance to really think of the name of it, but it's like the love at first sight, like that, the instant love. That's what it is. that was too much for me. I couldn't really believe in their relationship, and both the characters were fine individually, just like I couldn't really follow their. I kept rolling my eyes. Is really what it's about. And this next one is a Harlequin romance. This is Roots of Heaven by Annabelle Murray, and this for sure is the retro romance readathon. And I found this at a free library. You can tell I have the ebook here because I have a picture here because I've already gotten rid of all these books. Because this is another one I didn't care for. I think this came out in like 82, if I remember right. And it's about a woman who is, I think she's from like New Zealand or something, and she is, I might be making that up. But anyway, she's from afar, and she's traveling now, and it's like mountain country area. I think it was like Italy or the Mediterranean, something like that. And her brakes go out on this like cliff, and she like runs, and she kind of blames it on this one guy who like runs her off the road. But her brakes were out, so there's only so much the guy could have done, and he is much, much older than her, like 20, 30 years older than her. And her previous boyfriend, she's really jaded, she doesn't like men, she doesn't want anything to do with him, because her previous boyfriend was also, I think, she's like 20 or 21, her last boyfriend was like 40s, and so I think he's like late 30s, something, I can't remember, something like that. And so it was that alpha macho men thing, and then she was just like helpless, and I didn't care for it in the least. So yeah, there's that one. And also, like, it's not just that, but like he plays like mind games on her, and it's like, you should, anyway, didn't care for it at all. And the next one is a Debbie Maycomer book. This is Dakota Born, and this is the first book in the Dakota series. I started this book because I have another one on my shelf, if I can. Buffalo Valley is the one I have on my shelf. And what I liked about this is that it included multiple characters, and so it wasn't just like that romance heavy focus, which is, I don't really care that much. Like, I mean, I can read it, but it's not like my go-to thing. So I liked how I had multiple characters. That being said, I feel like there was too many characters in this one for me to really get to know anyone. There was so many different storylines, and like different romances, the different like things going on, family members and all that for each of them, that I'm like, it was hard for me to care, if that makes sense. And in this one, it's about the main characters is a teacher, or she got a minor in education, and so she is living in Savannah, and she goes back to the Dakotas. I think it was South Dakota. North Dakota, I can't remember. One of them. That's what I'm saying. Dakotas. I can't remember. It was a really small area, and it's a small town that's losing all of the population, getting smaller and smaller. Like, all the businesses are closing up, and it's so small that it's like going back in like the olden days of like a one-room schoolhouse where all the kids from all the different grades were in one classroom. That's how small of a population that they were dealing with, and so they don't have a teacher. And so when she is going to this small town to see this area, because her family is from there, and her grandfather had just died, and so she wanted to see where he was from, like this area that he's always loved and talked about. So she goes over there to visit, and then she finds out that there's a teacher position needed, and even though she doesn't have even a full teacher's license, credentials, all of that, she just does a minor in education. She decides to take up the offer and decide to teach there. And so it was an okay story. It was just, I don't know, yeah, and also kind of cringy, eye-rolly. Something with the romance language and all that. I mean, some of the words they use, I'm just like, oh, I don't know, corny, and yeah. So I will get to this one eventually, but not probably anytime soon. I need a break from the corny language. And then I have Guts. This is the true. It's really fuzzy for me to see. It says the true stories behind Hatchet and the Bryan books. This is by Gary Paulson, and I recently read a memoir by him, talking about. I have it on my shelf somewhere. Maybe I could grab it. Probably not. It's probably up here somewhere. But I recently read a memoir by him, written for adults, talking about his time. And so I was curious to see his other books. He's written a couple other memoirs, and so this one is literally like its description says. It's talking about. It even includes little clips, little sentences from the Bryan books and Hatchet, and it's all about how his own life is what inspired him to write these different things. And so he talks about how there's one example of how Bryan has to use his hatchet to strike the stones to get sparks to start a fire. And so before he wrote that in the book, Gary Paulson tried to get that to work himself to make sure it was actually doable before he put it in the books. So yeah, this is like his like how his life story kind of matches with Brian and living out in the woods. So that's all the ebooks. Well, I read a lot of these as physical books as well, but I've got rid of a lot of them. So yeah. Then I'm going to go to the physical books. So finishing up with the romance books, this is by Carolyn Gift Page. This is Beguiling Masquerade, and this is also part of the Romance Readathon because it's published in 2003, right at the cutoff. And this is a Heart Song Presents, so it's like a faith-based book. I think these were eventually turned into the Love Inspired series. I think like the publisher maybe bought that or something like that happened. So to have in front of me, I can actually give you the names of these people. So it's Becky, and then the male is Rand. So Becky, she is taking a class in college, and she's got all sorts of googly eyes for the professor, and so she has an assignment. She's like a sociology major, or psychology major, and so she has an assignment for her like dissertation, and she decides that she's gonna put on like makeup, wigs, and all of that to get into the mindset and see how people treat her as an elderly woman in her 70s or 80s or so. And so so when she goes to visit the nursing home to get, you know, more like a kind of like a survey of these elderly people, she doesn't know anyone there. She befriends one of the women who her grandson turns to be Rand, which is her professor in college, which the googly eyes that she's given him. And so she becomes friends with him through the grandmother, and so he's like, you know, thank you for visiting with my grandmother, and you're such good friends, and you're so smart, and all this other stuff. So she becomes friends with him like that. But what got me was like the first date that Becky thinks she's I don't know, she's living in like La La Land here, because she's posing as an elderly woman. Rand doesn't know that this is her dissertation, doesn't know that she's doing this study at all, doesn't know it's her. She thinks he eventually comes to find out when she finds out her name, and then she discloses that she is the grandmother of the lady, you know, of the woman who's in his class, and that's how she like pulls it off. Well, how she looks, you know, kind of similar. Anyway, when he said, because she's gonna like they finish the nursing home, and so she's gonna go home, and she says, she walks every day. He's like, it's too late. And it's too far for you to walk, this late at night. And so he gives her a ride home. That is it. It's like a mile. And then she gets out of the car and she thinks to herself, this was my first date. And I can't remember all she says, but she's like, I hope I made a good impression and whatnot. And she's she's posing as an 80-year-old woman. And I'm like, what in the world? And how is this a date? And what are you thinking? I don't know. So it was okay overall. But again, like just too eye-rolling for me to handle. And then the last romance book is by Carla Neggers, and this is Just Before Sunrise. And this is about a woman who is living in Maine, and her whole house gets like wiped away in a storm. She loses everything. All of her family has died or moved away, and so she wants to get a new lease on life. And so she moves to San Francisco and opens up an art gallery, because that's what you can do in a very expensive San Francisco. And you're rebuilding your life from scratch. This is from 97, and so she starts off with making friends with people in the area, and one of the women pays her like something like thousands of like $5,000, something like that, or $1,000, something ridiculous, because to pose as in an auction for her to bid on this painting. And so she's bidding, like she's given money into her bank account, thousands and thousands of dollars, to buy this painting. And there's one other person there, and this painting isn't anything special. It's not a very expensive painting, but there's one other guy there who's like, they're racketing up the price into in a bidding war together. And they come to find out it's because it's his his like wife that was murdered, and he wants like a last like memento from her. And then they come to find out that the woman that gave her all this thousands of dollars is also related to the woman in the painting, or like a friend of the family, and like she painted the painting, something like that happened. But I'm like, it was just kind of all sorts of ridiculous for me to read about, because it's just like romantic suspense. But for a stranger, a kind of sort of stranger you just met recently, I'm gonna wire you thousands of dollars and trust you to go spend it, and then here's some money to comp you on that thousands of dollars. I don't know. Anyway, it was just okay. Okay. So, that being said, now moving over to some of the last books I read, and these are all like pioneer related. So I read Settlers' Children Growing Up on the Great Plains by Elizabeth Hampton. I started this back in January, and I've been reading a little bit each day, and this is about, it's a nonfiction book about the pioneer settlers of North Dakota, and it mainly focuses on like the Dickinson area, I think is what it was, and it talked about different, it pulled information from like journals and letters, and also the author, Elizabeth Hampton, she interviewed, because this was published a while ago, interviewed people who still remembered their like childhood from this time. And this book came out in 91. And so she was able to interview children who had grown up in like the North Dakota area, who remembered that like homesteading kind of life, which I thought was fascinating. And so this kind of prepared me to move on to the Little House books. So I don't know if this needs much of a description, but I read Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and this is all about Almanzo's life in upstate New York and Malone, and so his farming time there with his family. And I feel like they're very different in a way from Laura Ingalls' family, because Laura Ingalls' family is like, they live in really small houses and they're constantly moving around and they don't have a lot of money. Whereas in Farmer Boy, in Malone, like their family's very much established. They have a lot of family in the area, and they have a lot of friends that come over, because his mom, Angeline, loves company, and she talks about how busy she is, and they have elaborate like food everywhere. Like there's so much food, they're constantly talking about. He eats a lot. He's always like cramming his mouth. He wants to get bigger and stronger, because he's like the youngest boy in the time, and then his brother is like 10 years older than him, and he's like the man in the palace outside of his father. You know, someone he's looking up to, so he wants to get big and strong like his brother. And then I read On the Banks of Plum Creek, and this is following Laura in her time in Minnesota, where she is living. It starts out living in a dugout, but while they're built like in a sod house before they build like a frame house on Plum Creek. And for anyone who's read the series, this is the one where what stands out in my mind is the whole like grasshopper scenario, which I think is fascinating. I really want to read a book about that at some point. Like a nonfiction book about it, because these grasshoppers like come in, it's like a yearly thing, and they eat everything in sight. And the way she describes it, they're like march, and when they finally leave, they eat everything, and they make a bunch of noise, and they can't walk anywhere. Like kind of like the locusts, they come out every like 7 years or so, that I can think about in my own experience. But when they leave, they get ready to leave, they're like marching along, and they're like going over, marching up the side of the house, going over the roof, and going like they're just like going on one direction, nothing can stop them. And so yeah, I'm wondering what that's all about. And then the last book I have here is By the Shores of Silver Lake by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and this is the 5th book. And this is when they finally make their way to DeSmet, South Dakota, and they this is their first time there. When the railroad is just getting built, and so there's no town really to speak of yet. And once like the camps leave for the winter, the Ingalls family decides to go ahead and stay, because the main, what is it called, the main like railroad head guy, like, oh, I'll give you my home to stay in if you want, because it's always someone can look after it, and then it'll be here. It's already has lots of provisions there already, and so you're welcome to stay. And so they do stay, and so they're all by themselves, with a couple of other people like scattered out who also make their way during the winter there. But mainly it's just them on an empty prairie, and yeah, so it kind of like gives you some inklings of what's going to happen in the next book with the long winter, and I'm currently reading that one now. So these are all the books I've read in the first 7 days of February. I'm hoping to keep up the momentum throughout the month of February, because it is a shorter month, and again, like I mentioned in the last video, I want to cram everything in as much as I can. And it's not that I want to I'm like trying to hit a high number here. I just want to get through all the books. That's my main motivation. So yeah, I will talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.